The envelope was on the kitchen table when I got home. My name on the front. My parents' handwriting. I didn't open it right away. I just stood there. Something about the way it was placed, centered, deliberate, felt like a performance. I picked it up. Set it back down. Made coffee. Watched the steam. Opened it. Inside was a single printed page. A number at the top. A request at the bottom. And a line at the end that said, "We know you can afford this." I read it twice. Then I folded it, put it in my back pocket, and sat down. I didn't say anything to anyone that night. I just thought about every year I had spent working, every loan I had carried, every meal I had skipped, every holiday I had missed because I couldn't afford the bus ticket home. And I thought about the year they looked me in the eye and said, "College is your responsibility. We can't help you." That's when I realized something was very wrong. I'm not someone who carries bitterness around. I want to say that up front. I left home at 18 with a duffel bag and a decision. My parents had made it clear, not cruelly, but firmly, that higher education was not something they were prepared to fund. My father said money was tight. My mother nodded along. I believed them. I worked through undergrad. I took loans. I graduated in 4 years with honors and about $62,000 in debt. I paid it off myself. Every cent. Over 7 years. I moved to a different city. Built a career in financial consulting. Not glamorous, but stable. I saved aggressively because I had learned, early, that no one was coming to catch me if I fell. I didn't talk to my family much. Not out of anger. Just out of habit. Distance and silence had been a shared language in our house growing up. Then my sister started college. That's when the calls started. At first they were normal. "How are you? How's work?" My mother's voice, light and casual. My father asking about the weather in my city like he'd never asked before. I should have recognized it earlier. But I wanted to believe it was just them trying to reconnect. Then came the comments. Subtle at first. "Your sister is really struggling with tuition. Private school is so expensive, you know how it is. She has so much potential, it would be a shame if she had to drop out." I listened. Said nothing. Sent a small amount one month, maybe $300, because I felt something that I can only describe as reflex. The old pull toward family loyalty. They thanked me warmly. Called again within a week. The next ask was larger. "Could you help with just one semester?" My mother's voice carried this careful softness, like she was handling something fragile. I asked a few questions. How much was tuition exactly? What financial aid had my sister applied for? Were there scholarships? The answers were vague. Redirected. My father jumped in. "We're not asking you to solve everything, just to help a little." I said I'd think about it. Then the envelope arrived. $150,000. For the full remaining cost of my sister's 4-year private university education. Including housing. Including a laptop. Including what they described as a living stipend. At the bottom, that line, "We know you can afford this." I sat with that sentence for a long time. They didn't know what I could afford. They had never asked. They had never shown the slightest interest in my finances, except to now suddenly assume I had surplus. I started thinking more carefully. Where had this number come from? Who had calculated it? My sister was 2 years into school. That meant she already had 2 years of tuition behind her. How had that been paid? I didn't ask. Not yet. I started paying attention instead. My sister's social media was public. I looked at it for the first time in months. Recent posts showed a new car. A trip to Italy over spring break. Restaurant photos I recognized as expensive even from the thumbnails. My parents had said money was tight. I thought about the year I ate plain rice and worked night shifts. So I stopped reacting. And I started watching. I started small. Quiet research, nothing confrontational. The first thing I did was call my aunt. My mother's older sister. She's always been the kind of person who knows more than she says, but if you ask the right question, she'll answer it honestly. I told her I was trying to understand the family's financial situation before making any decisions. I kept it casual. Just checking in. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You know your parents refinanced the house 3 years ago. Took out a significant amount." I asked how much. She paused again. I probably shouldn't say. But it wasn't a small number. I thanked her and let it go. That night I started thinking about timelines. My parents had refinanced the house roughly around the time my sister started college. Which meant they had access to capital. Real capital. Not a family scraping by, a family that had made a financial choice. A choice that didn't include me, 8 years earlier, when I needed it. I didn't react to that. I wrote it down. The second thing I found came from my sister's college directly. I called the admissions and financial aid office, said I was a family member trying to understand what support was available for a current student. The woman I spoke to was helpful in general terms. She explained what types of aid existed, what parent contribution models looked like, standard information. But then she mentioned something that stopped me cold. She said that for students whose families demonstrate financial need, there are specific grant tiers. But she also noted that families who report assets above certain thresholds don't typically qualify for those grants. I asked what kinds of assets would affect that. She listed a few. Real estate equity was one of them. If my parents had refinanced and pooled equity, and if they had reported their assets accurately on my sister's financial aid forms, my sister likely qualified for far less aid than she would have otherwise. Because on paper, my parents had money. But they were telling me they didn't. I sat with that for 2 days. Then I called my cousin. He's close to my sister's age, grew up in the same neighborhood. He mentioned something offhand that he didn't realize mattered. He said my sister had mentioned, at a family barbecue I hadn't attended, that her tuition was mostly covered, and that she was using her stipend for other things. Mostly covered. A stipend. I asked where the stipend came from. He said he assumed it was from our parents. I asked if she'd mentioned loans. He thought about it. No, actually. She said she wasn't taking any loans. Said her parents were handling it. Her parents. Our parents. The same parents who told me, college is your responsibility. The same parents who watched me take on $62,000 in debt at 18 years old. I didn't say anything to my cousin. Changed the subject. Ended the call normally. Then I opened a spreadsheet. I began building a timeline. Every fact I had. Every date. Every number. The year I left for college and what they told me. The year my sister started and what the refinancing records suggested, which I found, because mortgage refinancing is a matter of public record. I cross-referenced property records online. The numbers were there. They had pulled just over $200,000 in equity from the house the summer before my sister started school. And they were now asking me for $150,000 more. I thought about what that meant, quietly, without letting myself feel it fully. Because if I let myself feel it, I would pick up the phone. And that would have been the wrong move. I printed everything. Organized it into a folder. Then I did one more thing. I called my sister. Kept it light. Asked how school was going. Asked if she was worried about finances. She laughed a little and said, "Not really. Mom and Dad have it handled." "Why?" I said, "No reason. Just checking in." She said, "They did mention you might be helping out." "That's really generous." I had not agreed to anything. I said, "Yeah, we're still talking through the details." She said, "Cool. Hey, I might go to Barcelona next semester for a study abroad. Fingers crossed." I said, "Good luck with that." We hung up. I looked at the folder in front of me. Confronting them would have ruined everything. I took a week. Just lived normally. Went to work. Made coffee. Answered emails. But every evening I sat at my desk and built the case a little more carefully. I want to explain something about how I think. In my work, I analyze financial behavior for a living. I look at patterns. I look at what numbers say when people aren't paying attention to them. I'm trained to stay unemotional about data, because emotion distorts analysis. So that's how I approached this. Not as a son. Not as a brother. As someone reading a file that didn't belong to him yet, but soon would. The public records had given me the refinancing figure. $204,000, pulled from the house equity in June, 3 years ago. I had the date. I had the amount. I had the lending institution's name, which was listed in the county records. That wasn't illegal to find. It took me 20 minutes. I also went back further. My parents had told me, when I was 17, that they didn't have money for college. My father had said it plainly, "We've got nothing saved. You'll need to do this yourself." I had believed him. I had no reason not to. But I started wondering now what the house had been worth then. And whether equity had existed. I used archived property valuation tools. Cross-referenced assessed values from that period. Conservative estimates put the home equity at somewhere between $80,000 and $110,000 at the time I left for college. Not nothing. I added that to the folder. Now I had a document that told a specific story. A family that had available equity when I needed help, said nothing, watched me borrow $62,000, and then 8 years later pulled $200,000 to fund my sister's private university, spring break trips, and a potential semester in Barcelona. And was now asking me for an additional $150,000. For a family that had nothing. I made 3 physical copies of everything. 1 stayed at my apartment. 1 went into a safety deposit box at a bank 2 neighborhoods from mine. 1 I couriered to my personal email archives as a scanned PDF with a timestamp. Then I called a lawyer. She specialized in family financial disputes and estate matters. I had worked adjacent to her firm through a client referral 2 years earlier, and had her direct number. I called and said I needed a consultation. She fit me in within 4 days. I brought the folder. I laid it out calmly. The timeline. The property records. The equity figures. The ask. The history. She read through it quietly. Asked a few clarifying questions. How old was I when I took the loans? Had I ever received any financial support from my parents as an adult? Had I signed anything in response to the letter they'd sent? I said no to all 3. She looked up and said, "You're not legally obligated to give them anything." I said I knew that. That wasn't why I was there. She asked what I wanted. I said I wanted to make sure that if this escalated, if they threatened anything, told other family members, I had refused, tried to use my sister as leverage, I was protected. And I wanted to understand if there was anything in what I'd found that rose above a family disagreement. She thought about that carefully. Then she said, the equity situation when you were 17, that could be worth exploring if there was any kind of financial dependency established. And depending on what they've told other family members about your finances, or your intentions, there could be reputational considerations. I said I understood. She said, build a written record going forward. Every conversation. Every request. Every implication. I said, I already started. She gave me a framework. Nothing aggressive. Just clean documentation. If they called, I could respond in writing. If they escalated, I had a foundation. I left her office and felt, for the first time in weeks, completely steady. On the drive home, my mother called. I let it go to voicemail. She said, we haven't heard back about the letter. Your sister's next semester deposit is due soon. We just want to talk. Call us when you can. Her voice was warm. A little tired. Perfectly calibrated. I saved the voicemail. Transcribed it. Added the date and time to the folder. Over the next 10 days, 3 more calls came in. Each one a variation of the same message. Gentle urgency. References to family. One mention of how much I had always been the responsible one. One from my father, shorter, that ended with, we're counting on you. I saved every one. My sister sent a text that said, hey, Mom said you're going to help with tuition. That means so much. You're the best. I had still agreed to nothing. I didn't reply to the text. Instead I wrote a single email to my parents. No anger. No accusations. Just a request. I said I wanted to understand the full financial picture before making any decisions. I asked them to send me documentation of my sister's financial aid status, the current household income, and any outstanding debts. Reasonable questions. The kind any financial advisor would ask before recommending a transfer of $150,000. They didn't reply for 4 days. When my father finally responded, he said the finances were complicated and that they'd prefer to discuss it on a call. I replied that I was more comfortable with written communication for record-keeping purposes. No response after that. They went quiet. And that quiet told me everything the documents hadn't already said. I scheduled a follow-up call with my lawyer. I also contacted a family financial mediator she recommended, someone neutral, credentialed, who could facilitate a formal conversation if needed. I drafted a letter. I didn't send it yet. I just had it ready. And then I waited. My parents didn't know any of this. They were still assuming the next call would be me agreeing to wire the money. They were probably planning around it. Telling people. Telling my sister. They thought it was just another day. It wasn't. The call came on a Tuesday morning. My mother, my father, and my sister. All 3 on the line together. I knew from the first few seconds it had been rehearsed. My mother opened with how much she missed me. My father said he was proud of everything I'd built. My sister said she was excited for us to be closer as a family. Then my mother said, we were hoping you'd had a chance to think things over. I said I had. I told them I wanted to set up a formal meeting. Not a phone call. A sit-down with a third party present. I said I had been working with a financial mediator, and that I thought it would be useful to have someone neutral in the room when we discussed a request of this size. Silence. My father was the first to speak. He said that seemed unnecessary. That this was a family matter. I said I understood, but that $150,000 was a significant sum, and that I wanted the conversation documented properly. I said it calmly. No edge in my voice. My mother said, "We're not going to sit in a meeting like we're in some kind of legal dispute. We're your family." I said, "I know. That's why I want to do this carefully." My sister said nothing for the rest of the call. My parents pushed back twice more. Then my father said they'd think about it and hung up. 2 days later, my mother called alone. Her voice had shifted. Softer. More careful. She said, "I don't understand why you're making this so complicated. We never asked you for anything before." I let that sit for a moment. Then I said, "I'd like to talk about that, actually. I'd like to talk about the summer I left for college. And about the refinancing 3 years ago. I think it would help me understand the full picture." Another silence. Longer this time. She said, "Where did you hear about that?" I said, "It's public record." She didn't respond right away. When she did, her voice was different. Flatter. She said she had to go and that she'd call back. She didn't call back. My father emailed me 3 days later. The tone had changed entirely. No warmth. He said that my behavior was hurtful, that I was creating division in the family, and that my sister was aware of how I was handling things and was very upset. I forwarded the email to my lawyer. She advised me to send the prepared letter now. I did. It was 4 paragraphs. Measured and clear. The first paragraph acknowledged the request and stated that I had given it serious consideration. The second outlined, factually, the financial history as I understood it. The equity available during my college years. The loans I had carried alone. The refinancing. The amounts. No accusations. Just a timeline with numbers attached. The third paragraph stated that I would not be contributing the requested amount, or any amount, at this time. It explained that my decision was based on the financial record, not on a lack of care for my sister, and that my sister was welcome to explore the same loan and scholarship options I had used. The fourth paragraph was the one my lawyer had helped me draft carefully. It noted that several family members had been told I had already agreed to contribute, which was factually incorrect. It stated that any further communication implying my agreement, to my sister, to extended family, or to anyone else, would be something I'd need to address formally. I sent it certified mail. I also sent it by email with a read receipt. My mother read the email within 11 minutes. No response came that day. What came instead, 2 days later, was a call from my aunt. The one I had spoken to early on. She said my mother had contacted her, upset, saying I had sent a legal letter, and was threatening the family. I asked my aunt if she wanted to know what the letter actually said. She said yes. I read it to her. All 4 paragraphs. Slowly. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "She told me you were refusing to help out of spite." I said, "I refused because they told me at 17 there was no money." There was. Another long pause. She said, "I always wondered about that. I didn't push further. I didn't need her to take my side. I just needed the truth to exist somewhere outside of my folder." The semester deposit for my sister's school came and went. My parents paid it. They had the means to. I had known that from the beginning. The performance of urgency, the manufactured crisis, had been designed to move money from me to them under the cover of family obligation. It didn't work. My sister sent me one text, about 3 weeks later. It said, "I don't really understand what happened. But I hope you're okay." I replied, "I'm okay. Good luck with your semester." That was the last message between us for a while. I didn't close that door. I just didn't force it open. My parents stopped reaching out entirely after the letter. Extended family heard fragments of various versions of events. Some of them reached out to me. I responded honestly, without drama. The facts were straightforward and they stood on their own. Most people, when they heard the actual timeline, went quiet in the same way my aunt had. There was no blow-up. No confrontation at a dinner table. No screaming or ultimatums or scenes. Just a letter. And a silence that followed it. My lawyer sent a brief follow-up to my parents 2 months later, simply confirming that my position remained unchanged and that no further contact regarding financial contribution was necessary. It was procedural. A formality. A closed door, marked and dated. I kept the folder. Still have it. I don't look at it much anymore. I think about the version of me at 18 sometimes. Standing in a financial aid office, signing papers, telling myself that the debt was manageable, that I was capable, that not having help wasn't the same as being failed. I was capable. That part was true. The rest of it I've had to revise. There's a version of this story where I stayed silent, sent the money, and told myself it was the right thing to do for family. I almost did that. The pull toward it was stronger than I expected. But I had built something with my own hands, carefully, over many years. And I had learned, the hard way, in the most formative years of my life, that no one was going to protect it if I didn't. So I protected it. No rage. No speech. No dramatic moment. Just a folder. A lawyer. A letter. And the understanding that love and accountability are not opposites. That night, everything was quiet. If this story stayed with you, you know why. Sometimes justice doesn't look like a confrontation. Sometimes it looks like a certified letter, and the sound of nothing happening afterward. Drop a comment if you've ever been the one expected to give, after being the one left to figure it out alone.